Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
I am okay. I'm all right.
Yeah,
How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Yeah, I feel like it's just slightly a little more on top of things than usual, maybe.
I have a plan for my flu shot, so I feel better than I did this time yesterday.
Oh, good, good. On campus?
No, they're not doing them on campus for us, I don't think, unless you have like a special.
Anymore? Okay,
Yeah, so I just found a retail spot that was doing it. A lot of the places in Bath are already sold out, so we're getting in
gotcha,
Thompson.
gotcha. Well, thank you. Welcome to this virtual space, and thank you for being willing to do this. Um,
Absolutely.
we can start off. I'll give a little bit of, very brief context, but maybe we could start off just introducing ourselves, if you would, just saying your name, uh, perhaps your preferred pronouns, if you like,
Cool.
and what you do for the college.
So my name is Benje Douglas. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I have two roles on campus that sort of fit together. Title is the Associate Vice President for Inclusion and Diversity, and I work closely with the Office of Inclusion and Diversity and Michael Reed, connecting with student affairs in the efforts to make Bowdoin a hopefully more inclusive space for the diverse students, staff, and faculty that make up the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other role is in Title IX coordinator. So I specifically work to put the Bowdoin Title IX policy into place and hopefully administer it as fairly as possible for all parties, again, students, staff, and faculty as necessary.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm Roland Mendiola. I use he, him, his pronouns. I serve as the interim director and a clinical psychologist at Counseling and Wellness. And the intention of this project, for a little context for you, Benji, and for anyone who might be listening to this interview, basically comes down to one, an opportunity for, in particular, students, but anyone in the campus community, to hear voices across the college on a more personal level that they might not be exposed to typically. And then secondly, to specifically explore the intersection of mental health, stigma around mental health issues, identity and culture. That's the hope in having these conversations.
Sure.
So again, I really appreciate you taking the time. I feel really lucky to have this opportunity to talk to you in this way, and just kind of see where it goes. We've tended to be, I feel like, pretty casual with this, and allowing people to feel hopefully comfortable, taking it in whatever direction they like, and speaking at whatever depth they feel comfortable as well. So please, like, anything you have to offer, there's really no right or wrong way to do it.
Sounds good to me.
All right, perfect. So right out the gate, first question is, did you grow up talking about mental or emotional health?
If possible, I would say we talked about it, but we didn't use those terms.
Right, right.
So like, I am the youngest of three. I'm about 9-ish years, 9 or 10 years younger than my sister and brother. They're about a year apart. And I would say that as a kid, I don't ever remember the term mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
If anything, I would say the first indication for me was there's these television commercials. It was like Two Rivers Psychiatric Home.
Yeah.
I remember watching as a kid, and I was like, "What's that?" And I think somebody in my family said something, whatever you say to that. It's where you go when you're
right.
whatever.
And this is roughly what era would you say?
Oh, I'm a hardcore, what do you call it? Zennial. I'm between Generation X and the millennial generation.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'm a 80s baby. But I identify with Generation X. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know what's going on with all this technology stuff. But
that's right.
No, I would say this would have been me in like 1987 or 88. Like,
okay,
old enough to get into just enough sort of conversation about things like this.
Yeah.
Maybe as late as 88, 89.
Yeah.
The Bush years, Bush one. And I remember asking about it, and it struck me that when you have problems with your brain or with your mind, that's where you go.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
I knew there was kids in school. We had what we called back in the day. It sounds terrible to say it out loud. BD, behavior disorder, I think is what the classes were called.
Okay. Yeah.
And LD, learning disorder, is what the classes were called. Whether they were called that literally or just what kids called them, I don't know. But like, I knew that certain classmates went into those rooms depending on the circumstances. Like, it felt like when your parents got divorced, you went into that room sometimes. Um, and then I would probably say it wasn't until definitely college where I thought about mental health, like in the context where people use the term mental health. We had a counseling center in my undergraduate campus, and that was the first time I'd really been introduced to a mental health practitioner in like a professional role who could assist me. Now, but to answer your question, we definitely talked about it. It just was like,
okay,
how are you doing? Usually, how are you feeling? Not like how's your bladder, you know what I mean? Like, or how's your leg? It was like, how are you emotionally doing? Which I think is actually, I've come to realize as an adult, a pretty profound question.
Right.
And that was something that my parents asked me quite often. And
how are you doing?
Yeah, how are you doing? They would regularly listen to the answer, which was enough to talk about my emotions at the time. I seem to remember feeling like you could never say things were too bad because people wanted to hear how good things were going. So I don't know if that was just my understanding of it, but like it was never like you had 3 bad days in a row, we're going to talk to a therapist. It was until you have some sort of trauma, you don't need to go do something like that. You haven't had any trauma in your life, therefore you should be cool. And that's kind of the underlining, but with a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of faith. So I grew up in a very religious household. And I think there was this undercurrent of go to counseling if something is wrong, not in any terms of maintenance or primary care, anything like that.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate this theme about like, for a long time, and it probably still carries in a lot of ways today, the view of like, that's for when you have problems, that's for when there's something wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. And then of course, I also appreciate like, there was clearly a lot of care expressed and in different ways.
Absolutely.
Any reactions to that as you're reflecting on it? Like how that sat with you, how that fit like the bigger context of like your life at that time, how that compared to like peers or community?
Yeah. So like it's hard for me to think about mental health without thinking about sort of like my social location, right? So my parents moved from Selma, Alabama, through the Vietnam War in college to Jefferson City, Missouri. And then from Jefferson City, Missouri, my father went to a historically Black college. My mom was raising my brother and my sister while he was in school. And then I was born, I think, with the benefit of my parents just being far more stable, right? We've been married for over 10 years. They had, more time, more money, more space. And the world was probably just a touch kinder in the early 80s than it was in the early 70s for Black folks. I say a touch because I'm going to be realistic on this call. And they essentially, though I don't know that there's a plaque for it, desegregated a community in Kansas City. So my brother and sister really paved the way for all the challenges that went along with being the Black family in this white community.
Wow.
And for me, I feel like I couldn't afford too many off days. Like, if I was having a bad day, kind of had to compare that to your your near, not even use your ancestors, like your near relatives who, had fought in the civil rights movement and had been part of that sort of expressed desire for justice just a decade or two before. Like if a teacher, if a student said they didn't like me, I wasn't going to get too bent out of shape about it. So it was almost like if I had a bad day, I needed to have a bad day. And if I was going to talk about it, then it needed to be something particularly odious to bring it up. And that sometimes weighs on me a little bit, not negatively, but just the idea that like I do tend to not address problems until they've gotten to that 7, 8, 9 category instead of 1 or 2.
Right.
To use sort of common language that I think people understand.
Yeah.
Also say that the stigma around being Black and mental health, I think, is something to explore. I don't know that it's as pronounced as some people set it up to be. And by that, I just simply mean, I think if you use mental health as a broad definition, whether it was talking to people at the church and the community, there was definitely people who would talk to, but again, I don't know many people who went and got therapy, so to speak, or counseling.
Yeah.
So I think it was like one of those situations where if you could imagine you go to the doctor when you break an arm, but not when you sprain an ankle. I think that's how a lot of people view mental health, at least in the community where I grew up. It's like you go to the doctor, like if something bad happens, sure, go see somebody. But like if you just had kind of a couple of rough days strung together, you need to deal with that on your own.
Right.
Deal with that with the ice or whatever. I don't know what the mental health version of ice and compression would be, but like imagine there is one.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, it brings up this issue that I think either comes up or I think we'd like to address with students when it just doesn't come up naturally. But this issue of kind of the unwritten rules about what you're allowed to disclose or not about your emotional well-being.
Yep.
You're touching on, you know, everything from, well, I should never say that it's so bad. And interestingly, a lot comes up for students around like, yeah, it's like you can't say you're too bad, but you also almost can't say you're too good either. There's that end of it. And then you're also saying like, well, if I am going to say anything, it should be bad, right?
Yes.
It has to warrant like some kind of actual.
Exactly.
But we're also conditioned not to report and complain like when things are bad, is what you're saying.
No, I think that's very well said. Absolutely. I would say just for me, it comes down to, again, I use this first aid, like if you have a small cut, like you just fix it yourself, right? Like you don't go get your mom or your dad or whomever is around. Right. And I think that emotionally, I put everything into the small cut category, right? And so the things that really bothered me, I just made them feel like they weren't that big of a deal. And then as I've gotten older, I realized the stuff that really bothers me, I unfortunately have done the same thing. Like it's a natural sort of, oh, it's just not that big of a deal. Yeah. Even when I know it's a larger portion of the way I think and would like to think than I would like to.
Right. Right. And which is why, you know, a question easier said than answered for a lot of our students. But, you know, I think we do typically bring up the question, how do you know when things have gotten bad? You know, like, what are the indicators for you, right? What are the signs? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you're asking me that.
You're welcome to go there or to just comment on the question. Yeah.
I'm going to comment on the question. I'm going to use my lifeline, phone a friend. I feel like that's such an important question to ask because I think unless you have somebody who's really self-aware, and I'm talking like super self-aware, I think it's hard to know when you need help. And then by the time you do need help, I won't say it's too late. That's the wrong language, but that you're already past the point where help would have been really easily offered. And now you're into a super intervention as opposed to a regular one.
And let alone the hurdle of asking for help.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Which I'm not laughing because it's a laughing matter. But
No. I understand.
If I may, can I ask you to speak on, Benji, you know, help folks know where these things land for you now.
Sure.
Yeah. How you feel about these issues now?
So, I mean, I'd like to say I've had a 180, but I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I would say that counseling became a really alive part of my life, I would say, in my first graduate. So my first real experience with counseling in a professional context was when I worked in residential life as an undergrad. I walked one of my residents over to the counseling services, and it was just like, this is what you do. You kind of walk the person over and you sit in the room, and like I immediately felt like when I crossed the threshold, like something had changed, you know? Oh, you know, I'm inside I'm inside the room. I think I've never been in that performance-based thing where like you have to let people know how comfortable you are. Like I just remember like my 20-year-old self being, oh, I'm comfortable sitting in the waiting room of the counseling, you know, so it is fine. I will read this magazine. And it was like, I think I had to convince myself how okay I was with it. Yet I never thought of taking up the resource myself, still operating in the sense that it needed to be a serious thing.
That's right.
In my first graduate program, I was in the seminary. And so I was taking classes with a lot of people who were going to be pastors, and pastoral counseling was a very big deal. Right. And you do like these sort of, I want to say practice sessions is probably, I can hear clinicians around the country like vomiting. practice sessions is too strong, but whatever version's not going to get people, their license revoked for saying they did practice sessions.
Right.
And I realized that a lot of what I thought counseling was not what it was, right? I thought it was like going in there very prescriptively, sitting down on a couch and being told, you're anxious because of your mother, right? Like that's what I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
And it wasn't. And it was actually really cool to talk to a person who I usually deeply respected and had some sort of personal connection to, like actually listen to what I was saying, and not interrupt. Or maybe better put another way, if they were interrupting, it was interrupting to better understand what I was saying and not to say something themselves.
Yeah.
And that was refreshing. That was, oh, this is pretty good stuff. It was my second grad program that I was like, okay, I need to go to counseling. I need to talk to somebody about what's going on with me, and I want them to not fix it, but to at least address my concerns in a very real way, and hope that what they'll hear is some things that I'm saying and that'll make it a little bit better. And, I didn't end up with a long-term relationship with a therapist. Again, I go back to this like Frasier, thing or whatever else, like these images in my brain.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that at all, but it was this person who just knew how to listen in a way that was really profound, at a time where I really appreciated that person being willing to listen.
Yeah.
And to talk as necessary.
Yeah.
And then it's like been a bit of a desert since then, I'll be honest with you, right? So the last 10 years or so, I have both wanted deeply to have a counseling relationship, but I've struggled because as I've gotten older, I realized part of what I've looked for is a counselor who identifies as a person of color, ideally a Black man, not because I haven't had great success with other people over the years, but I think as I get older, identity starts to matter more into the concerns that I'm having and the anxieties I'm feeling and the issues that sort of surround the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice to have that shorthand. What I liked about being in Texas and at the seminary was that, again, many of my colleagues, I had this immediate shorthand with them, and that's what I appreciated. Almost more than anything else. And I feel sometimes, at least the conversations I've had over the last 10 years or so, they've been, I've had to spend too much time kind of explaining what I felt was real.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely no fault of the counselor. I want to be really clear. I don't think that anybody set out to do this. It's almost like they were just so curious and interested that it felt like the entire conversation was about sort of the setup, and then, we didn't quite get to the delivery, right? And as a personal area of comfort, especially living in a state like Maine, I think I've just become more hyper aware of my day-to-day Blackness. And what I mean by day-to-day Blackness is the sort of daily transactions that happen that people notice that I don't even realize they're noticing because I'm Black and they don't see that many Black folks. That I think for me in a counseling situation, I'm looking for extreme comfort to get uncomfortable, if that makes sense. I know I'm not going to like it by the end of it or everything I hear, but I'm already so defensive that I almost can't take in the information that I would like to. So I would say that I'm in a constant sort of month-to-month grind to find the right community. I'll use that term sort of loosely, but this is a person who I could count, half a dozen counselors as decent friends, and a couple is very good friends. I feel like it's a struggle that I'm having. So I do worry and think about what it'll be like for the next 10 or 15 years, because it is something I would like to think of more as maintenance and preventative than responsive. That's something I would like to get into the habit of.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful mindset to have. You're saying so many important things, like no surprise whatsoever. And while I'm thinking of it, and we can talk offline about it, I'm happy to offer, for whatever it's worth, some resources. I think there's a lot of folks out there, or a lot of organizations taking advantage of the opportunity to provide resources right now when we don't have to do that. We don't have to access that locally.
Exactly. No, I'm glad you said that. That has been a huge thing since March, I would say. Yeah.
So I'm constantly learning about new resources and providers specifically dedicated to BIPOC community.
I appreciate that.
And always happy to share those. other things that I'm finding really important what you're saying. It's so important. It's why it's so important that we try to communicate how genuinely, really brave it is to step into the office, and make the decision and ask for help. All those different pieces, right? And that means something for different students, definitely, depending on where they come from and what the relationship to just emotional health has been. I have to ask a follow-up question to something you said too, where that level of deep listening that you're talking about, which is, like you said, profound, and it sounds like it really resonated with you. I'm asking partly because it's my experience too. Was it also, would you say it's also at a level like unsettling too for people?
1,000,000%, right? Like, it's so funny. So I think back to my buddies and whatnot who are counselors, and sometimes they have a way of just like sitting there. And I will say this, like, if we're gonna be friends, you can't, like, counsel me. We're gonna be friends, right? Like,
Right.
I don't want an auditor looking at every dime. I don't think so either, right? But it's this idea that I'm so used to sort of combative conversation, right? I think like the more, I'm going to say schooling, and I know that's a code word for some people who might be listening or listening at some point. I think education and schooling are different. I think the more formal schooling we get, right, like the undergrad and the grad programs and all the different people who you work with, I think you learn how to sort of treat conversation as combat, right? To really destabilize arguments and to reframe them and punch holes in them. And like, that's what I'm used to, so to speak.
Yeah.
To have a person just sit there and listen and like feel like they're not just waiting to talk, number one, but then number two, that they're really trying to process what you're saying and really understand it, it is unnerving, right? It's like this idea of like, I think I can name drop him, but like sometimes when Bernie looks at you, it's like, are you looking at me or are you looking at my soul?
Yes.
What's going on here? And it's a wonderful gift, but it's like it's akin to the person who also knows, all the tricks to kill all the zombies in zombie movies. Like, you're in awe of that person, but like, you're also like, wow, how hard is it to just be that disciplined and to have that sort of focus and to have that sort of care? Like, how do you turn it off, right? Like, how do you sort of let yourself come down from there?
That's a great question. The whole thing also makes me think of, in my old spiritual community, we used to talk about this idea of listening someone into their own wisdom. And
that's good.
Yeah, right. That it's like it's hard for any of us, I think, to hear our own wisdom a lot of the time,
Yeah.
with just all the noise.
Well, and I know we work in the academy, right? So people talk a lot about anecdotal data, and I tend to use the term lived experience as opposed to anecdotal data, and that's fine. I can hear, again, sociologists and whatnot. But it's like, one of the great things about lived experience is that it can give you, I think, a lot of resilience for what you have to face. And while maybe N of one, it still doesn't mean that it's not useful, right? For your own journey and what you're dealing with. And I've had to come to grips with the fact that like some of the things I thought I learned 20 years ago, I didn't. I just kind of put them on a shelf, and I've had to take them down and sort of look back in there and be like, oh no, I thought I had this lesson, but that's been disheartening. But also, no, it's been disheartening. But it's also, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. It's just been disheartening. But in the disheartening piece is, I guess, the one thing is like, we're not finished products, right? Like, I bemoan the fact that, oh my gosh, I don't know how serious to take this. Like, those 25 under 25 lists, and then 30 under 30, and then 35 under 35.
Sure.
Like, I'm about to age out of my capacity to be on one of those lists because, like,
right, that's right.
There's no 43 under 43. Like, that's not a thing. And I'm trying to make this connection in a way that's not going to be embarrassing for myself. I guess the best way I could put it is, I think the people who get how to be younger, like just how to live in their own skin, can have tremendous success. And what I've had to learn basically once every 3 or 4 years is just be you. Just be me, be Benji. Don't try to be someone else. And
Wow.
like that's that recurring piece of wisdom that when somebody usually listens, they're like, oh yeah, I gotta stop trying to be,
Yeah.
this person or that person.
I
Yeah.
just literally had that conversation with a student. I'm like, I know I can't say this. You're not supposed to say this because like it's too simplistic, it's too cliche, it's too naive. But yeah, that's where I landed. It's like you just be yourself.
Yeah. Well,
And yeah, yeah,
that's what makes you also good at your jobs because it's like you don't actually have to say it after a while. Like you just let us talk around to it, then we'll say it. Like, yep,
that's right.
boom.
That's right.
You know?
Every so often we'll clarify. But I'm like, I'm saying this as someone who knows you. We've been through it for a while now.
Yep.
And so you can trust me. Yeah, yeah, all of that sort of thing. I feel like you spoke to this question already because I feel like that's just beautifully how your mind works already. But anything else you would add in terms of who you are, where you come from, that specifically shapes your relationship to health and wellness?
Yeah. So I would say definitely my understanding of masculinity has had a huge
Mm,
role in this as well, right? So
yeah,
like rub dirt in it.
yeah,
Never let him see you sweat, don't cry. Like all those things were really sort of magnified.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I got married 9 years ago next month. And
Wow.
it was profound, right? It changed my life.
Hmm.
And one of the things that it's done is it's helped me understand that much of who I am, I like who I am. I got married a little bit later than a lot of people do.
Yeah,
And it's good for me to have a better sense of who I am.
yeah,
I think if I got married at 22 or 23, I would have been trying to be a man
yeah,
so much that would have been off putting, right?
yeah,
And it's funny because my partner, she's will see a problem in YouTube how to fix it. And be like, I just changed, I just changed the timing belt in your car. She would not do that, I don't believe. But like these sort of traditional sort of like, I'm gonna put my hands to it, put my mind to it, and get it done. And I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and pay this person over here because they're gonna be a lot better at it than I am. They're gonna get done a lot faster. So I think masculinity's played a large sense of, and I've had to let go of the idea that I can be self-sufficient in all ways
mm,
and that I know everything because I certainly do not. That there's some things I have huge gaps in knowledge that I would love to fill, and some
mm,
things that I may never fill. But I think like being a man for me was like never letting anyone doubt your capacity to be competent,
yeah,
right? Always know 30 seconds of a conversation about any topic. I don't know anything about, Antarctica. I don't know a thing except it's cold. But
yeah,
like the idea that I would need to have some sort of substantive conversation with somebody about Antarctica is just ridiculous. And that's the kind of thing I thought at 19 and 20. Um, I
yeah,
don't think I would have been best friends with me at 19 because I would have been trying to outdo me,
yeah,
and just it just was too much. So I talked a little about race. I think gender and
yeah,
expression of gender and like these gender roles play a huge role in the
yeah.
way that I see myself in mental health.
I mean, as you're saying it, it's amazing how much we liken ourselves, not liken, but sort of expect something almost godly of ourselves,
Yes.
all knowing, all powerful,
Yes.
invulnerable.
And like so the term mansplaining is definitely entered into the common tongue for most people, or a lot of people, I should say.
Yeah,
And what I find so fascinating about it is this idea that I could be at a party talking to somebody who's studied Renaissance art, and all of a sudden I start just pontificating about something.
that's
And they
right.
look at me and say, I have a PhD in this. I'm like, oh.
Right.
And like, it's that embarrassing sort of cringing. And then the idea is like, why not ask the person a question first? What do you think about it? Rather than just starting to talk about like my own thoughts and my own capacity.
Right.
I
Lock
remember
it
one time I was about to, I in this desire to feel competent. That's the one word I can use. This desire to feel like I'm at home in all lands, right? Like I can do anything if given enough time.
in.
I
Yeah.
think it's in the way of real relationship more than anything else. And like real relationships to me are the healthiest thing I've ever done, right? Like that is the bedrock of the mental health that I try to hold on to is I try to be authentic with people in relationships
Yeah.
and appreciate them for who they are and not spend so much time trying to compete with them or feel like I need to be like them
Mm,
or that I'm doing something wrong by being who I am.
so great. It's so great. Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, with your example, like, yeah, like why don't I just focus on actually relating to this person, as opposed to like trying to prove my own competence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the other thing I would say is faith, right? So I think, you know, uh, I don't want to go over time here, but like I think the way that faith relates to mental health is so important. Um, in part because as a person of faith, a person who believes very deeply in
Yeah.
sort of at times anachronistic um, Mesopotamian religion that over time has come to mean a lot of different things for different people. I've had to balance what it's like to read in the Bible things that are deeply like, painful to read, right? For no other term.
Yeah.
There's these texts of terror in the Hebrew Bible that people talk about where it's like a whole village just gets smote, smitten, I don't know, whatever, killed.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think for me, the seminary was extraordinarily helpful in ordering out the sort of day-to-day thoughts of what it means to be a person of faith and believe that you can believe deeply in this grand mystery, but then also be grounded in the compassion of loving your fellow neighbors aggressively, well, maybe not aggressively, but like with a lot of integrity and kindness and generosity of spirit. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. Um, Growing up, I think religion was much more about condemnation, unfortunately. And I switched unintentionally from faith to religion, but I think that that's not too unintentional.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I am 100% of the generation. When the people say I'm spiritual but not religious,
Yeah.
I am religious, and I think I'm spiritual as well.
Mm-hmm.
The person who uses the term faith as opposed to religion.
Yeah.
But you know, growing up the way that I did, I think people were constantly looking for what you did wrong as for the reason why you were going through hardship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just can't tell you how uncomfortable I feel when people say things like, well,
Sure.
you know, the Christian tradition was you reap what you sow. But I think outside of that, you hear a lot of people talk about, you know, karma. I took a deep side of it because I don't think people understand karma or dharma with the lick. That's okay. It's another issue. But like, I think religion's long played a role in my mental health and understanding of like the proverbial question, why does God or the great, you know, mystery allow bad things to happen? And like it took some real both academic work to understand that, I think, but also some soul searching that I didn't do at 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those three things I would say factor the most: race, gender, and religion into the way that I really program and understand mental health and well-being.
Well, and that last piece I feel like speaks to yet another, I think, important reason why people don't come forward with their mental health issues or emotional problems that they're dealing with, because there is, whether it's religious or not, there's almost the expectation, I think, that people are going to judge or people will blame you in some kind of way.
100%. And that it could be something as simple as, you know, don't drink a coffee a day or you'll never be able to afford a house.
Mm-hmm.
Or don't buy an avocado toast, my goodness. But like it all comes down to, I don't have to change this system. Your personal decisions keep you from your success.
That's right.
And I'm a systems-based person, and it's just such a damaging day-to-day reality to feel like whatever choices you make somehow predicate whatever, you know, outcome you're going to have. And I will say, as a person who also believes in science, right? I'm about wearing my mask and using my hand sanitizer and washing my hands.
Yeah.
But like, I don't love this context that only weak people get COVID-19, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or only, you know, you have to fight it. And if you don't fight it like a warrior, then somehow you're going to succumb. Like, I just don't think the world's ordered out that way.
Mm-hmm. Benji, I think we have time for these two questions.
I'll be fast.
No, this has been great. You've been doing just perfectly with all this. Thank you. I mean, even just to name it, because I feel like, so, you know, the premise of this, part of it is just the acknowledgement that I would argue, I think a lot of us in the field would argue that mental health is an ongoing elephant in the room, something that to still some great extents you're not supposed to talk about, sometimes not even maybe even think about or feel about exactly. So and recognizing there's a lot of, I think, elephants in the room that students are silently dealing with. any that you would want to name right now that
Yeah.
feel salient to you or the world we're living in today?
Definitely anxiety
Mm,
over like feeling anxious, right? It's like this
yeah.
idea that like I need to calm down. I need to calm down. I can never calm myself down when I say that, right?
Mhm. Right.
It's like that feeling of like it's okay. And I don't know the clinical way of putting this, so forgive me. Maybe you can help clean it up. But like, it's okay to not feel in control
Hmm.
because I'm not in control of some of these other things.
Yeah. Definitely.
Um, I'd say this feeling of sort of I'm not doing enough or not enough, like the perfectionism piece, like
Yes.
this idea that like somehow I'm supposed to be if I have a minute, I should be out there, doing burpees. Like that makes sense, but like maybe that minute needs to be just sitting in repose and thinking about the world you want to create, right? Um,
Mhm.
you know,
And they feel pretty well related. I just want to mention, in my experience, my
yeah,
personal experience, my work experience, anxiety and perfectionism go pretty well
yeah,
hand in hand.
yeah.
Yeah.
This one's kind of a bit of a zig, but I would say I think as a general rule, it's very easy on a campus like ours and just in general in higher education to take yourself too seriously in the sense that like I think a lot of people think they're going to be senators, U.S. senators, state senators, some kind of senator,
Mhm.
uh, and that's maybe not the case. I already sort of alluded to these 30 under 30 lists, and I think that just because you make one doesn't mean your life is made. If anything, it's the sort of fear of peaking too soon, or like you, you've you've gone from getting great grades and all these awards and all these scholarships to feeling like, oh my goodness, what comes next? And that feeling of like that dip of like I'm no longer being graded
Yeah.
for my work. I'm no
Right.
longer getting these sort of so I wish people felt like the grades didn't matter.
Yeah.
Talk about cliches. Some of the best classes. Sorry, computer's very excited. I apologize.
All right.
One of the things that's very real for me in terms of like my own life was I had fabulous learning experiences where grades were not attached. I could not tell you what my undergraduate GPA was. Obviously, it was on 4.0, I remember. But like in grad school, doesn't really count because grades are weird. But I just, I learned so much in some of my no credit classes. I learned so much in those talks with professors.
Yeah.
And I wish there was more of a drive to just, I hate to say it, learn for learning's sake. That's so terrible. But like,
No.
just not being that because at some point you're not going to get it anymore and you shouldn't feel like you
Right.
can't still learn.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a better writer than I was at 18, but I don't know if I could get an A on a paper if I had to submit one to like a professor depending on the work that needed to be done.
Hmm.
But like the way I order thoughts and think and can synthesize, so much better than when I was 18. But it's like you focus so much on getting the grade that it almost pulls you out of the learning zone, at least in my opinion, my experience.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
also, I wish people just had a little, just in terms of elephants in the room, just a little bit. So the other thing about not taking yourself too seriously, in my opinion, is have a little bit more fun. Just the fact that like, no matter what your personal belief system is, right? Like
Right.
whether you believe in reincarnation, heaven, hell, nothingness, like you got one good shot at this that you're in.
Yeah.
And I wish people just enjoyed it a little bit more.
Right.
Um,
I think what you're talking about too, how much we like all lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing.
yeah, yeah. Like I, I, I will see these. The one good thing about Twitter is the random, baby and cat pictures and everything else that come up that are just cute, because it's like at the end of the day, no matter what's going on in the White House, no matter what's going on in your other contents or on the community you're part of, all that stuff is awful. I mean, we're very comfortable saying headlines will be awful. But
Yeah.
like the day-to-day stuff, right? The moments of joy that come up between, taking a nice walk or talking to a friend or having a really good bite or listening to a great song. Like, I just wish there was a way to transmit that joy as being just as valid as when we're stressed. Because we have no problem telling people, generally speaking, like colloquially, I'm so stressed. But we really have a hard time, in my experience, telling people colloquially, I'm so joyful. It just doesn't go that way, right? And people don't
Yeah.
even trust really joyful people. Really, what's wrong with them? So I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying it to anybody else. It's just I wish we just had a little bit more
Same way.
fun,
Yeah.
knowing that life is hard as it is. So when we can kick back, why don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like even when the opportunities are there, if we haven't done the work to let ourselves do that, I mean, like that's not even the right language, doing the work, but the practice, almost trained ourselves to do it. Like, we'll just keep doing what we usually do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like you're answering all my questions before I ask them. So thank you for that. Anything else you would add to this last question of what you feel would be the kind of message that would feel important for students to hear from you about how to cope with the times we're living in?
Yeah, I would say that, I think it's okay to be sober-minded and serious while still recognizing that there's something can be done, right? Like, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. Like,
I totally agree.
I want to hold on to some of my quote unquote naivete as long as possible and my idealism.
Yes.
Because the world will grind you into nothingness. And like, God bless historians who bring some of these things alive. A historian online was talking about how I wish we would stop comparing everything to the Roman Empire. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just there's so many societies and cultures and people groups that have morphed over time. And like, I think it's okay and maybe hard to say out loud that the United States of America, we may add stars to the flag, right? It's already happened in, my parents' lifetime, right? We may change fundamentally some things that look like we're always going to look a certain kind of way. Like, just in my lifetime, we went from playing the Oregon Trail on Apple IIe to being able to get the internet on your watch, right? Like,
that's right.
I'm okay with the progress that comes along with day-to-day living and like those sorts of changes, but I just wish students could think about the fact that you get to shape the future by your decisions. So don't, like, sometimes I read the Letters in the Orient and I'm like, yeah, I would have wrote the same thing in 19 or 20.
Yeah.
I get that. But like, I want you to feel like there's so much more in front of you, because my one sort of walk-off line, and it's probably not good enough to be a walk-off line, so if there's anything else to say after this, we should say it. But it's like, it's not if I knew then what I know now, right? It's not if I had my 20-year-old sort of like body and mind that, never got a cold and could run all day and yada, yada, yada. With this mind, I'm going to conquer the world. But like, I just wouldn't have spent so much time wondering what my purpose was in the world, right? I wouldn't have spent so much time wondering if I was doing everything right.
Yes.
I don't think I got real honest again this confidence until I was about like 32.
Yeah.
I had some approximation of it. I had done some things that were pretty decent. I had some success. Boy, I was wildly insecure because I thought that's what I had to be.
Yeah.
I thought I had to be emotionally tough and closed off and this, that, the other thing. And like, at the end of the day, I needed to chill out. Yeah. Right. I needed to just take a breath. And so maybe it wasn't 32, maybe it wasn't the actual calendar year, but it was the day I realized that, I coached a 6th grade basketball team at one point, some volunteer work. And what was interesting is we'd put plays in and they would absolutely not do them. 100, like, they would actively not do them. Like, I don't want to do that play. It's terrible. I'm much better at this than you are. Oh, okay, I get it. And it really was payback for all the coaches that I similarly did the same thing.
Right.
And it's like, if you could take the mental discipline that I have now and put it in like my young athlete's body, I probably could have gone pro, because the mental piece was just something I never paid attention to. It was all see the ball, get the ball, score. Yeah. See the ball, get the ball, score. And now I realize, see the ball, pass the ball, cut off the ball. Maybe you score, maybe you don't. Yeah. Make the extra pass. And like, it's been an interesting transition, because the older I get, in some ways, the more I look forward to doing things that would have terrified me 20 years ago.
Right.
Now absolutely. I'm like, all right, let's give this a go. So I hope that students here, it's okay to be terrified at 20, but you don't have to lock it in, because if you can unlock this puzzle a little bit faster than most of us, your 20s is going to be a heck of a lot better, number one. But then number two, the world spread out in front of you is going to feel so much wider, so much bigger, and so much more depth than you ever could have imagined, right? It's like, it really is like turning from, it used to be from black and white to color. We used to have a black and white TV. It's going from regular definition to HD to 4K or whatever we have now, right? It's just so unreal to feel like.
Right. And you cannot fathom it back then.
Yes.
In the earlier times.
Yes. It's the level up.
I'm just nodding all the way through what you're saying.
Yeah. But, and the last thing I would say, for real is, if you have a chance to talk to somebody like Roland, Dr. Mendiola, like, do it. Not because I personally respect him and have affection for him as a friend, but because I wish I had. I never talked to counselors, deans, anybody in my early 20s, and things were harder than they had to be. Full stop. If I had taken a moment to just process some of this, and this is my last anecdote because I know you got to run. So about 2 years ago, I don't know what the movie was. It's Trainwreck with Amy Schumer.
Okay.
I'm watching this movie with my partner, my wife. I'm not really letting it get to me. But by the end, I'm like sobbing. I'm like, why am I so sad about this Amy Schumer movie? And I realized, it's not a great film. Though LeBron James has some
Okay.
interesting acting chops. What it is though was like this sense of transition. I felt like I was like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. I watched this sort of not great raunchy comedy. It was like I don't have to have it all figured out even now, right? Like
Yep.
professionally set up, making a salary, doing the work, whatever that means, doing the practice, which I appreciate so much more. And like I was still like emotionally like just racked by this movie.
Yeah.
And it was good to realize that I'm just a work in progress. I'm not a finished work. And I had a buddy once who was an artist who talked about that, right? Like
Yep.
everything can be added to or revised or corrected. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And because I am definitely not a finished product and hope students don't view what they are either.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that, Benji. And I want to just say real quick, I hope I can say the same, not that I hope, but I mean, part of welcoming this conversation is because I imagine, I don't want to speak for you, but that you would welcome students also reaching out to you.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
I would, with the utmost, confidence, recommend students reaching out to Benje Douglas, and obviously has so much to offer. And I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you as a person, Benji. Again, thank you for taking this time and speaking. In just such
absolutely
a personal, profound way. I appreciate that.
No, thank you for the invitation.
Let's follow up. We'll end here. But please feel free to reach out if you want to follow up about this. I've been telling folks, depending on how this pans out, I'm feeling the same way this time. Of course, like I would love to have you back and maybe have some follow-up questions.
Oh my goodness, that's the hour of the week right here. I'm going to call it right now. Tuesday before 3, I'll take it. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Benji.
All right, take care of you.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.